All right, David, great to have you back on Mea Culpa. Thank you again for joining us. I got to jump right into it because there's so much going on right now, every single day. I wanted to start by asking you, with Republicans holding these razor-thin majorities in the House and the Senate, how do you think that Trump could overcome intra-party division to pass his agenda?
Well, that's a good question. We're still in a transition phase, in more ways than one, and we're, I think, all anxiously watching to see if Republicans in either the House or the Senate will defend their prerogatives and advance them and employ them. We know in the House they're basically all Trump toadies, right? And I mean, they'll go along with most of what he wants to do. If Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy really want to cut $2 trillion out of the budget, which would mean zeroing out healthcare benefits for veterans, Medicare, Social Security, yeah, they may not go along
Oh,
with
we're
stuff.
going to get to that, David. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, they may not go for that, but they'll generally be there for anything that Trump says. He says jump, they'll say how high. The Senate, as you know, is a much, at least historically, is a much different beast. And we're getting the first taste of that. I mean, the Republicans don't have control yet of the Senate. They will have it come January when the new Congress convenes. But we're seeing how they're responding to Trump's crazy, did I say crazy? Crazy appointments. They didn't go for Matt Gaetz. They, shut that down pretty quickly. I mean, now you don't get points for not appointing or for not supporting the appointment
Right.
of a guy accused of sex trafficking to run the Justice Department. You don't get points for that, but it was somewhat at least of a partial rebuke of Trump by saying no to this guy. We're now watching the Peter Hegseth saga, and by the time people listen to us, it may even be over. We don't know, but that's another place where this guy, put all the allegations aside about drinking and sexual assault, he mismanaged nonprofits. He has no qualifications for running what I believe is the largest organization in the history of humankind. The budget's $879 billion, I believe, 750 military bases around the world, 3 million or so employees, and including, I think, 2 million people in uniform. I mean, he just doesn't have the experience to do it, even if he was smart. Even, Michael, you're a relatively smart guy, but even you should not be appointed to run something like that if you have no experience, running a large organization, particularly in the military, which is a very particular kind of organization. So we're watching now to see, Joni Ernst and others, senators, Republican senators, Lindsey Graham, have expressed doubts about the appointment. We don't know if those doubts will turn into no's. We don't know if he will be yanked. But then there are these other appointments out there too. Tulsi Gabbard, who has no business running the intelligence community, which would be her job. She would be in charge of 18 intelligence agencies. She's been basically a talking point conveyor for Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And then you have Kash Patel, again, a guy who has no experience running anything, to run the FBI, let alone his lies about the 2020 election, his defense of the January 6th protesters. He wants to see them pardoned. He calls them patriots who are being persecuted. He calls them political prisoners. I mean, think about this. One of the FBI's most successful, certainly its largest case ever, has been the January 6th case. 1,500 arrests. Mm-hmm. I think they're close to 1,000 convictions, either guilty pleas or convictions at trial. And Kash Patel wants to come in and tell all these folks to go home. It's fine. This has been a big mistake. Plus, he has said quite explicitly that he wants to target Trump critics and opponents and use the federal government to do so. He has a whole list. He has an enemies list, including people in the media. So he is abundantly unqualified and he's been part of the lying crusade of Donald Trump. And so will they go along with that? If there are, I believe, and I'll finish up here, I believe there are Republican senators, maybe even a few Republican House members, who actually care about the Pentagon, that the Pentagon operates well and effectively and efficiently, and that they care about the FBI, and that they care about the intelligence community. And these aren't policy differences. You may not agree with the policies of Donald Trump, but the guy he's bringing in to be Treasury Secretary has experience in dealing with these matters. But these other institutions, people care about that. And the question then is, are you going to let Trump put the organizations at risk? I should include Bobby Kennedy and his gang at the Health and Human Services. Whether or not just that you care about these institutions, because Bobby Kennedy has no business running HHS, and more so by putting these people in charge of these institutions, you're actually putting America and Americans at risk. If the CIA isn't working well, if the FBI isn't working well, we're the ones who will pay the price with terrorism attacks, with the rise in crime, rise maybe in human trafficking. If HHS is run by a bunch of anti-vaxxers and vaccination levels go down, we're the ones who are going to pay the price with the spread of disease, measles. And just imagine this, we're here today, a lot of us, because of the development of the COVID vaccine. And that's the one good thing Trump did, and he just still can never own that accomplishment, pushing ahead with Operation Warp Speed. If Bobby Kennedy is in there, and there's another pandemic, and right now we see on the horizon the possibilities with avian flu, and they say, okay, we're going to start developing a new vaccine, right. He may say no. He may say, no, you can't use this on people. This is a Bill Gates big pharma conspiracy. So, without the vaccination, I don't know, I'm not an epidemiologist, but how many more thousands, if not millions of Americans would have died from COVID? And so these things are about preserving the institutions, but also about protecting Americans.
Yeah. So I want to go into two things. One, I do think that I could run a $900 billion enterprise. I just know for a fact I couldn't do it. I know for a fact I could not do it if it was the military, because it's very different. How you run the military is different than how you would run, for example, a communications company like X or a Facebook. They're not the same because they're different rules. And I don't know those rules. I've never lived that life. To run a company, obviously you will have many, many people there to provide you with the information, and you just have to be, one, available, and two, you have to be knowledgeable on your feet. I'm just not knowledgeable about the military in any way, shape, or form. So you're right. I would be absolutely out of my league to be considered no different than Pete Hegseth as a Fox News show weekend host, despite the fact he did 2 tours in Iraq. That doesn't make you qualified. And the fact that he's very bright doesn't make you qualified. There are individuals who have, and that are in that orbit that they should be considering, like a 4-star general. Maybe that's the guy that you want to put in. But let me move on and say something else that you brought up. Say Matt Gaetz. I don't believe that the senators forewarning that they will not approve Matt Gaetz as Attorney General is a rebuke on Donald Trump. I believe it's a rebuke on Matt Gaetz. Let's not forget that Matt had clashes with GOP leadership literally for the past 2+ years. And so I don't believe that this had as much to do with Trump as it had to do with.
Well, let me say this, and
Matt Gaetz.
Let me interrupt you for a second, because I think this is a key point, and I think this is something that Democrats are not latching on. It's a rebuke of Donald Trump because it shows Donald Trump's lapse of judgment, right? Appointing Matt Gaetz was absurd, absolutely absurd for a number of reasons, and I think that failure shows that obviously he's not invincible, that that senators won't do anything that he wants them to do. And I think that, that conflict, that clash there, should have been highlighted more by Democrats and pro or anti-Trump talking heads out there. I mean, I think it's a big, Trump, of course, tried to move on quickly from this, but it's a really big loss for a president-elect to take one of your 4 or 5 top decisions in terms of how you're going to staff the government, which are the most important decisions you make outside of going to war or not. And they said, no, you blew this one. You blew this big time. He lasted, was it one Scaramucci? I mean, I don't know how many, many, but so I think in that sense, the Democrats and others have not politically mined this for what it's worth, and they should.
Who really screwed up here, David? Who really screwed up here? The transition team. I tell you, it reminds me very much of 2016 after Trump won the election. I remember the very day after the election, people started stopping by everybody's office. And it was a set of papers about yay thick, maybe about an inch thick. And it had all of the positions that needed to be filled. And they were like, just write down names of people that you think would be interested and competent within which to do it. That's how folks like Pete Hegseth got the nomination. That's how people like Matt Gaetz got the nomination. That's how people like Tulsi Gabbard got the nomination, and Linda McMahon, and so on. People are just scribbling down shit. This transition team, they're not doing Donald any favors at all by putting forth names of people. It's one thing you want to make Linda McMahon the ambassador to Mexico, or you want to make her the ambassador to Italy, right? I could understand that, and I would say, okay, who gives a shit, right? It's great. I think she could do a great job there. But education? Really? And then you have, why don't you make Hulk Hogan, the Secretary of Defense? Come on, let's be serious now. The transition team is doing so much harm to Trump, who, as you know, he's not going to put in the time and the work within which is necessary.
But aren't these his decisions? And talking to a lot of them have the smell of Donald Trump Jr. on them. But aren't these his decisions? And they really seem to be designed to poke people in the eye. People say these are Fox people and whatever, but a lot of these folks are folks who've come out there and have just come and said, this institution sucks. This conventional wisdom is wrong. I know what I'm talking about, even though I have no expertise in the area. And, part of his whole campaign and part of this sort of right-wing populism is sort of a know-nothingism, that experts don't know what they're doing. They're elitists. They're telling you what to do. And we're going to come in and we're just going to pick people who have been defiant and contrarians. And that's our signal to the rest of the world, to people who think that credentials matter, who think that expertise matters. We're saying fuck you to them, and that seems to me to be part of the Trump ethos, and that people around him, like Donald Trump and Roger Stone and others, have been pushing for years. And so I don't think this is happening in a it's haphazard in a way that Gaetz talks to him and then on an airplane, and he goes, okay, I'll make you attorney general. But it seems to me that a lot of this is being driven by impulses that we've seen Trump express and give rise to. And it's not as if he doesn't know this stuff is going on, and he's decided not to let anyone around him, like last time, be a guardrail. He's like him. I'm going to let Trump be me. I'm going to let me be me. And I'm going to do all these outrageous things like Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, because I know it's going to get people upset.
Yeah, except for one thing. Look at what happened already with Matt Gaetz. Look at what will most probably happen with Pete Hegseth. Look at what's going to happen with probably Tulsi Gabbard too. I just don't believe that they get the nod from the Senate. And I think there are plenty of individuals. This kind of brings me to a question I really wanted to ask you, because, Trump has already made statements, as has others like Kash Patel, that they intend to institute what's referred to as retaliatory politics, that they're going to go after. Mother Jones has talked about this a lot, where these dissenting Republicans, people like Mitt Romney, people like Elisa Murkowski, right, or Susan Collins, they could actually face pretty significant punitive measures under his administration for being dissenters.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And addressing a little bit of your earlier point and pivoting to this question, to me, what was really kind of telling was that after the Matt Gaetz debacle, after, I think Trump was embarrassed by, this rejection, he still went ahead and nominated Kash Patel. We already knew that Matt Gaetz was out. And he still, he did it in the middle of the long Thanksgiving weekend, which is something I have to say I predicted, but nevertheless, that's not important. But he still went ahead, Matt Gaetz with Kash Patel, as if, I'm not going to learn from the Matt Gaetz business. I'm going to still go ahead with these crazy nominations. And Kash Patel, as we mentioned earlier, is highly unqualified. But yes, he's leading the retribution arm of Trump 2.0. He was on a podcast for Steve Bannon last year, and he vowed to go after anyone who challenged the Trump's big lie that he won the election. And that includes people in the media. He, in his book that came out last year, he put in a list of basically people he said were in the deep state, his deep state enemies list, and who could possibly all be targeted for investigation. They included some senators, they included Republicans, not just Democrats. I mean, they're the obvious people there, and I wrote about this in Mother Jones. Barack Obama, Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, all the people involved
Adam
in the Russia
Kinzinger, right?
Adam
McCain.
Schiff, people
Right.
like that. So they were on the list, but then he included Republicans like Bill Barr. Now, wait a second. Bill Barr, now, he didn't go along with the big lie and left Trump's administration in the last weeks, the first administration, but he undermined the Robert Mueller investigation, and Mueller is also on this hit list. And then he ended up supporting Trump in 2024. So, I mean, how is he part of the deep state?
David, as far as I'm concerned, as it relates to Bill Barr, I couldn't be happier. Bill Barr is the one that I hold responsible for the unconstitutional remand.
I'm talking about the ridiculousness of this idea that there's a deep state he's going to go after. Cassidy Hutchinson is part of the deep state. She was the young Mark Meadows aide who testified at the January 6th committee. What's her connection to the deep state? Well, she was an intern for I think the House Freedom Caucus and for Republicans before she was an intern.
They also said Alyssa Farah Griffin.
Yes, who worked for World Net Daily, far-right organization, before she joined Mike Pence's office. I mean, so he's out there with this crazy cockamamie list of people who they're going to get. But in some ways it's comical, but if he isn't put in charge of the FBI and starts, calling for these investigations, I mean, it will be devastating. Talk about weaponization of the federal government and politicization of the FBI. Plus, think about it this way. If he starts directing the FBI in that direction, what's going to happen to what it's supposed to do? Countering, drug lords and doing counterintelligence, dealing with violent crime, and also with corruption. I mean, if he's at the head of the FBI and you're an FBI agent and someone comes to you and says, I got a tip. There's this guy doing crypto and it's a complete fraud and sham and he's violating 20,000 different laws and he should, go to jail. And you go, okay, great. I'm going to go online and look this guy up. First thing I'm going to do. Oh, he gave money to the Trump campaign. Now, you're an FBI agent. You're making whatever you make, upper middle class income. You got kids in school. You got a wife who may be working, maybe not working. You have parents to take care of. You're going to think to yourself, if I file a case against this guy, I'm going to be seen as being a deep stater, and they're going to come after me, and I'm going to get shit canned. I'm going to be put to Siberia. They're going to say, oh, you can keep your job, but we're going to assign you, halfway across the country, and you got to think to yourself really hard, because this is not going to come from the outside. This is going to come from the head of the bureau. whether you're going to take that job, whether you're going to look at political corruption. We got a Republican on tape taking a bribe. Well, that's nice. You're going to, and he's one of Trump's big allies. All this stuff, think about all the graft, all the corruption. Here's the contract that, let's say Pete Hegseth gets to the DOD and they give out a contract to someone who's friendly with Elon Musk. And, there's corruption within the contract. And someone brings it to you at the FBI or the Justice Department and the Public Corruption Bureau. You're going to take on a pal of Elon Musk's and sacrifice your career and probably know that the case will never get anywhere. Pam Bondi's going to say, no, I don't think so on this one, but, thank you for your service and goodbye. So there is this tremendous potential for corruption and bad faith acting. And Kash Patel, is just truly the symbol of that. I forgot to mention the story I did this week. He's been supportive of QAnon. So he's a conspiracy theory monger. He has said he wants to seek revenge, be an avenging angel for Donald Trump. He has no qualifications for managing the Bureau. It is a big disaster. And I go back to what we talked about earlier, Michael, which is, are there enough Republicans, 3 or 4 Republicans in the Senate, who give enough of a damn about the FBI and have some consideration for the rule of law? They don't have to embrace it, but they have to think it shouldn't be totally destroyed.
Right.
Who will say no to this?
Yep. So let me move on and ask you this, because obviously another campaign promise by Trump, and it's not any different than what it was in 2017. Trump went ahead and he called NATO obsolete. And it's something that I believe you and Mother Jones examined in an analysis of his foreign policy just a couple of days ago. So my question I really want to ask you for my listeners is, do you believe that he would actively try to weaken NATO? Or is this rhetoric meant to pressure allies into compliance? It's actually part of a question that was asked of me a couple of months ago, 2 months ago. I was in Italy doing a television program. And they asked me that because obviously, Italy was one of the founding members of NATO. And they're freaking concerned. They're really nervous that what happens in the event that Trump does what he says, that he's going to end the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the war, in 24 hours. Well, the only way that you do that is you cut off any aid to Ukraine, because there is no other country that can step up and do for Ukraine what we have done. So you think that it's rhetoric, or you think that it's meant to pressure the allies?
That's really a good question. I think, as you know, Trump doesn't have much of a worldview about anything other than himself, right? So his ideas about foreign policy and such are always transactional. It's like, what can I say that will help me get what I want? Become elected president, or create a divide between me and the Democrats, whatever it is that he wants to do. And so, does he really care about NATO or transatlantic alliances? How much does he care about the Ukrainian war? After all these years, I still am a little bit flummoxed in trying to figure out what it is, outside of himself and his business interests and his family business interests and self-aggrandizement and grift and all the usual stuff that we talk about. What is it that he cares about? Now, he boasts that he got NATO members to pay more during his first term, and it's not that they pay a fund; it's about how much they spend on defense, vis-a-vis their overall budget. And some went up, some didn't go up. But whatever, it seems to me that
it's supposed to be 2%.
2%, right. And there are a lot of different ways of counting that, of course. So there's always an argument about what people are doing or not doing. But his rhetoric seems to suggest that the U.S. might even pull out of NATO. I think what he has said about Ukraine seems more immediate and more direct. Already we see Mike Johnson, House Speaker, saying there will be no more money in the continuing resolution for the budget for Ukraine, and that the tranche of funding that's being spent now by the Biden administration might be the end of it unless they pass the budget that has more money in it. And Trump's bullshit about ending the war in a day. I mean, and without telling us what his plan is or how he would do that. I mean, people are dying every single day there. Kids are being kidnapped by Russians and being forcibly adopted within Russia. I mean, and for over a year now, he's been saying, I can end this, but not going to unless you elect me. What a foul thing to say, that you care more about your own electoral process. If you have an idea to solve this, why don't you just lay it on the table and say, this is how we could do this in a day? Maybe Joe Biden will say, oh, good idea, let's do it over by Thursday.
Okay, I need to tell you about Tommy John. When you wear Tommy John, as I am right now, you're much more comfortable, so you can do everything better. Like, do this ad. I mean, it's time to up your game with Tommy John underwear. Tommy John's stylish underwear has dozens of comfort innovations. So, for example, they have a supportive contour pouch. They're breathable, lightweight, and they have moisture-wicking fabric with four times the stretch of competing brands. These are just a few of my favorite things about Tommy John. I love it, and I know that you will too. With over 20, you hear me? 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews. Guys everywhere love their Tommy Johns. So here's the thing. I've been trying different brands of trunks for years, and none of them are even in the same universe as my Tommy Johns. Tommy John fabrics, they keep you 2 to 3 times cooler, and they dry 4 to 5 times faster than regular cotton, which makes them perfect for travel. So go right now and shop Tommy John right now for huge savings and get 25% off your first order at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. Save 25% at TommyJohn.com/Cohen. See site for details.
But it's obviously just bullshit. And he also, as we know, has been a tool for Vladimir Putin. And so, one way to end it, as you suggest, is to have a total cutoff of aid and say Putin gets to keep everything he has now. And let's hope that Putin will stop where he is, which he may or may not. Ukraine can still carry on some of the fight for some length of time. Don't know how much, don't know how long, with the money it gets from Europeans who pay more than half. The United States doesn't have the lion's share here. Pay more than half of the, cover more than half of the aid, military aid that they've been getting since the start of the war. So they can continue on for a while if they don't like the Trump deal. But at some point they probably can't. So there are great reasons for the Ukrainians to worry. And because of that, there's great reasons for the Italians and others of the Poles to worry about what happens in Ukraine first before what happens with NATO. So that's, to me, the immediate pressing issue. And that's one reason why you want to have confirmation hearings and not have recess appointments. So when you bring in the Secretary of Defense, when you bring in Marco Rubio, who obviously is going to get confirmed, you have a public conversation about, okay, what is your policy in Ukraine as Secretary of State for Trump? What will you be pushing? And you try to have this not just be what Trump wakes up in the morning and wants to do.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this in furtherance, because I think that there is a tremendous misunderstanding by Donald and certainly the people around him as to what NATO actually is, what the purpose is, and so on. Because you guys in Mother Jones, you wrote something on this. Trump made an assertion that NATO members owe us money. All right. I personally believe that reflects a tremendous misunderstanding of the NATO alliance, or again, knowing Trump for a decade and a half, being a guy who sat by this guy's side shoulder to shoulder for over a decade, maybe it's a deliberate strategy to undermine NATO altogether.
Yeah, I mean, he looks at everything through the lens of how can I get some of this in my pocket, right? So he says, he said the Iraq invasion, would have been better if we had gotten the oil. if for some reason we could have gone in after the invasion and just, like colonial powers used to
Well,
do.
do you remember the term that he used? I'll give it to you verbatim. I was there.
Yeah,
To
well,
the victor go the spoils. And
yes.
he was
So,
curious as to why we did not take the oil, why we didn't take 10,000 troops, set them in a perimeter around the oil, pump the shit out of it, and sell it, but sell it on behalf of America, since we're the ones that saved the country. It's our soldiers that put their asses on the line. To the victor go the spoils.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of how he looks at it. So we're helping, in his mind, we are defending Europe from, Russia, if Russia should become a problem. Therefore, they should be paying us. It's, like it's protection racket, when actually it's an alliance. And by having a strong, hopefully democratic Europe, that does help America. Now, I'm not an overly, NATO type of guy. I thought at the end of the Cold War, there was a possibility to sort of break up the two sides way of looking at the world here. And so I wasn't a big fan of NATO expansion. But now with Russia, doing what it's doing, and I don't believe that you can argue that NATO has pushed it in this direction. I believe NATO needs to be strong, and it is supposed to be an alliance of democracies. Hungary and others are testing that, and we may end up testing that proposition. But so nevertheless, Trump, again, what does he care about? He doesn't care about alliances. I mean, he spends more time, in the first term and since then, praising our adversaries, whether it's President Xi of China, Vladimir Putin, or North Korean dictator, than he does praising our allies or speaking positively of them. When they praise him, like he gets invited to go to Notre Dame for the reopening, and now he loves them. But when he talks about them in general, it's like they're losers. And so, I think the Italians that you spoke to, and I'll be in Paris in a couple of weeks or a couple of days. I don't know if I have too many political conversations, but I think these people are right to worry. Trump is erratic. There's no foundation there in terms of values and principles. And, he may pull the rug out from under the Ukrainians, which could create a whole daisy chain of really negative events for Europe, the world, and for us.
So, David, I want to say this to you. I know that you're gonna laugh because it's funny, sad funny.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years now, since Trump decided to get back into the race, that when he made the statement that he could end the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours, I turned and said, there's only one way, as I said before. That's to cut off all funding, let Vladimir Putin run through Ukraine, which they will, because nobody provides Ukraine with more military equipment than the United States. Nobody else is producing military equipment like the United States does. So if we cut that off, Russia will walk right through Ukraine. And the big fear is that after Ukraine, they go right into Poland, which of course is making Poland very, very nervous. But I made a comment. I don't even want to say I was half joking. I was really serious that Trump will see that as an expansion, no different than you would expand your brand, right? The Trump organization. At the same time that Russia is now taking over land and assets from Ukraine, Poland, and so on, we know that China will probably walk straight into Taiwan. And we will have nothing to say about it because we don't care. But in Trump's mind, he's thinking to himself, wait. Putin just took over thousands and thousands of miles of land. China just took Taiwan. What are we taking? And that's when I keep saying that don't be shocked if he turns around and he decides, let's take Mexico. They're coming into our country. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, right? The only way we could control the border is to take it, right? And then we, with our military force, we will put these these gangsters, these drug dealers, the fentanyl manufacturers. We will put them all out of business. We will take them over. We'll burn their fucking lands down and so on. But it's not just Mexico that he would take. Why not take Canada too? Another of our border, countries. And then ultimately, what you do is you make the new border the shoreline. Now, everybody said to me, "You're being stupid." I have cousins. Half my family live in Toronto, and they called me up. They were like, "You really think that shit could happen?" And I said, "Fuck yeah." I'm being dead ass serious. All of a sudden, the other day, they start posting photos where Trump had a meeting with Trudeau at Mar-a-Lago, and he said, "Why don't we make Canada our 51st state?" And there's a photo of Trump that they superimposed him standing on a mountain with the American flag, and it said, Canada down on the ground, America up. This is our 51st state. I wasn't joking.
No. I saw that meme, and in fact, it looked like they had the Matterhorn in that picture in Canada, which it isn't. If you don't know where it is, you can look it up. And this is the inverse of an idea that I was playing with a couple months ago, in which Marjorie Taylor Greene and others have said maybe it's time for a divorce, time for a succession, between red states and blue states. And I said, oh, yeah, well, the blue states have most of the economic firepower in this country, and most of the the better medical centers and most of the places of higher education, and of course Hollywood and New York City. I said, why don't we do this? Why don't you look at the North, New England down to Virginia? You can look at the West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington State, and you can look at the top towards Minnesota, Michigan, and down to Illinois. And why don't we all join Canada? It would be contiguous. It would look like an M. And we can just say, okay, we're out of here. We're going to all join Canada. We can all have national health care. We will have a functioning democracy. We can let everybody in between basically create their own Gilead out of The Handmaid's Tale, and they can, end abortion, teach the Bible in the schools and all that. And, good luck to you. I mean, so it's a different way, but yeah, I mean, it's you're talking about, you're talking about militarizing the border, which he has talked about, but extending that border inland, south and north, and basically stealing territory in order to create what would be a militarized buffer zone, which would, I think, really require us to become something of a totally militarized society. Police state, you'll have to have a draft.
MAGA would accept that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying they won't accept it, but you'd have to have a draft. All the incels out there will have to actually do their time to patrol. This is a tremendous amount of land and territory that will be militarized. It won't be open to civilian use. Maybe you can pump oil out of it and do extractive industries.
Well, you have lumber, you have steel, you have aluminum, you have oil.
You can steal that.
Natural gas.
Yeah, but it would require a certain amount of commitment and time and energy. There'll be, the decision tree will be very complicated. Trump would have to spend a fair bit of time on this. He can't just say, Stephen Miller, you do this. So
why? He almost accomplished it in a 5-minute conversation with Trudeau about why not just becoming the 51st state.
Oh, that's yes, but the actual doing of it. I mean, we also remember. Don't forget that he wants to buy Greenland, and that may be back on the table. Although, but yes, I do think you're probably right. There's part of his ego that would want to be expansionistic in some way.
Well, if everybody around him, the people who he admires,
yes,
the Xi Jinpings, the Putins, right? If they're creating greater territory, why would I not?
Yeah, remember the colonial era when countries started looking at other countries and saying, well, they're taking that piece of of Africa. They're taking that piece of the Caribbean.
Hmm.
They're taking piece of South America. Why aren't we doing this? And we got to
Yep.
find an area that they haven't taken yet, or we have to push them aside. Like the Dutch had Manhattan, and the British said, we're not going to go for that, and we're going to push them out. But yeah, so
Yep.
I think conceptually, you're right that there may be some of that impulse there. How that comes about becomes a little more fanciful, but I would not say you're crazy, Michael.
I
Sometimes I would,
appreciate that.
but on this instance, I would not
Hey,
say
so thank
that's
you.
not.
So let me ask you this, because Donald has a legitimate relationship with Bibi Netanyahu. And I know that, again, Mother Jones has reported extensively on this. What do you think Trump's administration stance will be on the Israel-Hamas war, where he has said he could end that in 24 hours as well, especially given his longstanding history of supporting Netanyahu as well as undermining Palestinian negotiations? Let's not forget, right, that there was things that could have taken place that he undermined with conversation between himself and Netanyahu, which, by the way, I think is absolutely horrific, especially considering every day, as you accurately stated, I mean, there are people dying, every
Yeah,
single day, not just Russia,
right.
Ukraine, but certainly Israel and
Yeah.
Gaza.
We saw in the election there were Muslims and Arab Americans who were who refused to vote for Kamala Harris because of the
Yep.
Biden administration's support of Netanyahu, and there was even a group called Muslims for Trump, and now they're all there've been stories in the last couple of weeks about how these folks are upset with Trump's appointments. Well, my question is, what were you fucking thinking? I
Right.
mean, Trump was always, it was a terribly difficult moral calculus for people who were opposed to the Israeli military action in Gaza, to the excessiveness of it. That you know that they, if you oppose them, you're going to get Trump, and and there is no Palestinian who is going to be better under a Trump administration than if it had been a Harris administration. I mean, Netanyahu has, half his cabinet wants to basically annex the West Bank totally and kick all Palestinians out of that. They don't want to set up they're against a two-state solution. They don't want to give the Palestinians any agency.
Kushner
And,
wants to black tar the whole place and make it into luxury condos because
right,
it's geographically on the water, and it
right.
would make for very valuable housing.
Exactly. It's prime real estate, which is how these guys think, right? So it's you have what now with his appointments, particularly you have Mike Huckabee, who won't even call the West Bank the West Bank. He uses biblical terms, which is what the far right Orthodox Jews do, who want that to be part of a greater Israel. And we see Kushner and Trump and others, proclaim the wonderful accomplishment of the Abraham Accords. These were agreements between Israel and some of Arab neighbors that basically diffused some hostilities there. And they were working on one with Saudi Arabia that didn't come to pass. But the problem with those accords were that they totally cut out the Palestinians. They said nothing at all about what to do about the Palestinian question in Gaza and the West Bank. And that increased conflict and tension, and is one of the reasons that you had the Hamas explosion on October 7th, as horrific and awful as that was, because the question wasn't being addressed. And so you go back to something like that. If they don't address, and they just want to put the Palestinians to the side, we're doomed to have more war, more conflict, endlessly, and more violence and more deaths of civilians, kids and elderly people and moms and so on. So right now, if you're if you care about the Palestinians, if you're in Gaza or the West Bank, you got to be scared shitless that this ain't going to get better. He doesn't, his solution, he doesn't have a way of ending the war. He's trying to talk tough with Hamas and say, if, you don't release the hostages by the time I'm president, in 24 hours, you're going to be obliterated. Well, what does that mean? Most of Gaza is destroyed. They've gotten a lot of Hamas, not all of it. And it's always a joke to think that you can totally eradicate a force like that. So what is he going to do?
How do you eradicate, David? How do you eradicate a theocracy?
No, you can't. We can't. And how do you eradicate an idea when all the bombs you dropped have just, led to more recruits for extremism on the Palestinian side? So, how much? So he thinks he can come in there and bomb Gaza more than the Israelis have done, and that will somehow lead to the release of the hostages.
Yeah.
I mean, none of this makes.
This is a 3,000-year conflict going on here, right? I highly doubt that this is going to get eradicated in 24 hours based on threats, because at the end of the day, they don't mind dying for their theocracy, because the afterlife for them is better than the current reality life, right? You get, what is it, 72 virgins? You get to go to peace with 72 virgins, and you live like.
But also everybody needs a future, right? Everybody needs to have a sense of a future. If you don't have a sense of a future, you become a nihilist, and you become perhaps susceptible to that theology that you just mentioned. And until there's a path forward for the Palestinians, and I think we're 10 years away from getting past this current conflict before we do that. Unless you want to eradicate an entire people, and there are people in Israel who do want to do that, you have to give them a path forward, and that's not on the Trump game plan. It's not the Netanyahu game plan. It's not his cabinet's game plan. And so we're just going to be in for more, horror, and Israel is going to have to become, because of demographics, more and more of a police state. There are Israeli critics in Israel say it's already, getting close to, or is an apartheid state. It's going to have to be more and more extreme in these suppressive measures to sustain itself. So we're on a really bad path here, and and Trump, and Kushner, and what does he do? Who's the Middle East envoy who's going to solve all this? Tiffany's father-in-law, who he's the brand new envoy for the Middle East for Donald Trump. He looked around to find the most experienced, the most savvy guy, the guy who understood the Middle East the best. That was the number one person he was looking for. And it just happened, coincidentally, that it was the father of Tiffany, Trump's husband. I mean, what are the odds? What are the fucking odds of that?
Yeah, almost like the odds of Trump winning again. But I want to jump into this Doji program that is now being run by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Is it Doge or Doji? I don't know which one.
It's Doji. Department of Government Efficiency.
Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of like the Doji coin. That's why I pronounce it that way.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this question. What do you know about this program? And you think that this could be Trump's attempt to modernize the economy? Or do you think it just echoes the kind of gimmicky branding that we've seen in past initiatives like, what was it called? Space Force. I mean, Space Force reminds me of that cartoon I used to watch when I was like 10 years old from Hanna-Barbera,
we have had many task force and government commissions on spending and getting rid of regulations. George H.W. Bush was in front of one, ran one when he was vice president. I think Gore did one too, reinventing government. During the Reagan years, there was the Grace Commission, this industrialist, kind of like Elon Musk, put together a commission to get at federal spending. There are two things here that get kind of mixed up together. There's spending, just the amount of money. You have $7 trillion in the federal budget. Sounds big. $5 trillion of that or so goes to Medicare, Social Security,
And
Medicaid, and interest on the debt.
and veterans as
No,
well
no,
as veteran affairs.
no, that veterans stuff is different. But just $5 trillion. This is called non-discretionary spending. Basically, what you're committed to spend. Okay, and then $2 trillion is everything else. And of that 2 trillion, the military is about 800, 900 billion. So you're left with 1.2 trillion left for everything else. So if you cut every government service, national parks, veterans healthcare, veterans services, the entire Department of Energy, which is in charge of our nuclear arsenal, the entire Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, the FDA, the NIH. Sorry, Bobby Kennedy, nothing for you. If you cut all that out, you still don't come close to $2 trillion.
Right.
So,
well, in fact, the other that you're referring to is actually, according to everything I've read, 1.5 trillion. So
okay, I said
even
1.2.
Assuming you cut everything out from law enforcement to transportation,
FBI,
education, economic security, you're going to cut out
Secret
defense
Service
package, so everything, right? That's only going to leave up $1.5 trillion.
So basically, they're already coming in with this snake oil. It's another grift. You can't do this, and you can't do, wholesale cuts that will get you close.
And today's episode is actually brought to you by Ali. It's clean, fresh nutrition that your dog need in 5 flavors that they're going to absolutely flip over. I mean, you don't have to be a veterinary nutritionist to know that feeding your dog real, whole foods with minimal processing, it's one of the best choices that you can make for their health. A perfectly portioned, whole fresh food diet has been proven to extend your pup's life by 2.5 years. You hear that? 2.5 years. And who doesn't want more time with their best friend? With absolutely no harmful fillers, no preservatives, Ali, it's made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world. Because the time between Ali's gentle cooking and your dog chowing down is minimal, they don't need preservatives to extend the shelf life. I mean, with 5 protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, damn, my dog eats better than I do. And you know what? That's probably true when it comes to Ali. So look, here's how it works. I told my neighbor, go out and you fill in Ali's 30-second quiz, and then they'll create a customized meal plan that's based on your pup's weight, the activity level, and other health information. Ali then crunches the numbers, and they recommend the right recipes and daily portions for your precious pup based on hundreds of thousands of real dog results. And get a load of this, for the first timers, Ali will send out your pup's first box with 2 weeks worth of meals and a guide on how to gradually switch them over to their new diet. Ali offers 3 meal plans to choose from, so that you can choose from between a full fresh plan, fresh topper plan, or a mixed plan with their freshly baked recipes for your special fur baby. I mean, they also have treats and supplements. I mean, you think that you're talking about a person. You're not. You're talking about your favorite animal. You're talking about your pup. Ali's biggest sale of the year is here. So listen to this one. For a limited time, you get 70% off. 70% off your first box, plus a free bowl and a storage container. So head right now to Ali.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on a personalized meal plan. And this offer ends December 6th, so act now. Head over to Ali, that's OLLIE.com, and enter code Cohen to get 70% off your first box. Again, you can get 70% off your first box, plus the free bowl and storage container. So head to Ollie.com, fill in your dog's details, and use code Cohen to get the lowest price of the year on the personalized meal plan for your pup. Go now.
There's always waste and fraud and abuse. You have that in any corporation, and you got to figure it is like 1, 2, 3%. And it's just really hard to get because sometimes it costs more money to find it than what you end up saving. But in the military, of course, there are big contracts and big weapons deals that probably we don't need, we could cut out. But even doing that, which we should do, doesn't get you close. So they're coming in with this false idea that they can have a tremendous makeover in the federal budget. But the other thing here is that this is why I say they get mixed together, is what does Elon Musk hate? He hates the government. Why does he hate the government? Because the government has regulations, safety regulations, worker regulations, environmental regulations, and also, financial regulations about, what you can do with currency and securities. And he doesn't like that. He wants to, he has his Tesla business. There are regulators about what you can do with motor vehicles. He has his space business. There are regulations about that. There are regulations about contracting with the Pentagon. He makes billions of dollars a year in government contracts. He'd rather not have them be reviewed the way they're reviewed now. So his direct interest is in a weak federal government that doesn't act to protect his workers, the environment in which his companies operate, and for the financial world in which he wants to have a free reign. And so that to me is kind of amazing that they that no one has seen this for what it is. He wants to use this as a as a blunt instrument to get against to take apart the government that he doesn't like. And so they are out there already identifying mid-level government officials who are working like in climate change issues, saying, why do we need that person? And like they're doxing these people. These are people who, I don't know, they good upper middle income, they may have been there for a decade or more, developing government expertise, working for us, and they're targeting them. They're going to be targeting more of them, and it's going to be, I think, a real shit show. And they're not going to have any power to do anything because it's it's not. They call it the Department of Government Efficiency. It's not a department. It's an advisory commission. It's an advisory commission, but it also is going to be subject to rules, to Freedom of Information Act rules, open meeting rules, and they're just going to use this as a platform to target the things that they don't like. And again, take one big step backwards and think about it. Why do we have government in the first place? We have government in the first place to protect and to advance the interests of the community. You can't go out there and decide whether there's rat hair in the hot dogs you're buying, or whether meat's not being, kept at the right temperature when it's transported. You can't go out there and say, oh my God, that smokestack is sending lead up into the air. My kid is going to breathe it.
Right.
People, and you can't decide, well, I'm just not going to buy that stuff. Let the market roll, because you don't know. We need the government to do these things. And, from Reagan on, there's been a war on the government and the war on expertise. And that's what this is a grand part of, with the extra bit that it's not just ideological. In this case, it's for Trump's, it's for Elon Musk's own benefit, and for all his buddies are going to be coming to him and Vivek Ramaswamy saying, you got to look at this regulation, you got to look at this office. I'm having problems with this mining office. I have a mine in Colorado, and they won't put this dirty water into the stream. And they're
going to hit it up with. They're going to hit it up as well with nuclear and so on. But the part that I want to bring this mea culpa, because the hour goes by very quickly here. The part I want to bring up is something that you mentioned before, which was the Muslim Americans, specifically in areas like Pennsylvania and Michigan, who voted for Trump because they couldn't vote for Kamala Harris. Now, that's not the only area where things confuse me in terms of, and why I completely misjudged the outcome of this election. Here are programs that Musk and Ramaswamy have already said that they propose to cut. $119 billion from our budget for VA healthcare. And yet, look at the number of veterans for Trump. They're taking away your health care, the NIH. That affects every single American, VAs included, the National Institute of Health. Are you kidding me? Okay, Pell Grants, $22 billion. Head Start, FBI. They want to get rid of the FBI and its $11 billion budget. Federal prisons. Okay, that makes a lot of sense too, as well as the SEC. No shocker there with the $2 billion. You're
Yeah, I mean,
basically talking about dismantling the entire country.
listen,
How do you reconcile this? And how do you reconcile the fact that people bought into this, into voting against their own self-interest, education, healthcare, defense?
yeah. You can't see on my wall here, but I have a poster that someone gave me years ago from the 1930s from England, and it says, "Vote Labor in your own interests." And so, listen, Trump talked about tariffs. Tariffs, by most economists' measurement, will add of the type that he's talked about, will add $4,000 or so a year to the average household income. You worried about the price of eggs? Well, you're going to be worried about the price of everything if these tariffs come in, right? There are a lot of people you said, "Oh, I don't believe the mass deportation stuff is going to happen," and if it does, it's going to affect not just people deported and their families. It's going to be inflationary. It's going to raise the price of everything if we lose people who are here, maybe not legally, but who are here working and contributing to a host of different types of jobs. And so that will raise prices and also make things more difficult. It will raise the price of homes. The housing construction industry will have fewer workers. They'll have to pay more people, have to pay higher wages, and you'll have a harder time to get a house because it'll take longer to build or to do any renovations, and you'll have to pay more for it. So there was a lot of things here, let alone these budget cuts that they're talking about, that people were warned ahead of time that this could be a real world impact on you, and yet they still were angry enough or upset enough or worried enough or whatever, aggrieved enough that they voted for a guy who lied about the last election, who incited a riot, and who has talked about overthrowing all sorts of democratic institutions and guardrails, let alone the stuff about budget cuts. So now the question to me, Michael, is okay. Voters voted the way they did. He won by 1.47%. It's a 50-50 country. Half the electorate plus a few. It's not a total half. It was a plurality. So 49.8% of the electorate voted for him. So what are they going to do now? When they see this stuff happening, when they see these proposals, are they going to rethink? Are they going to, when they see people being rounded up who have been their neighbors and have been good workers for years? I'm not talking about criminals. They get criminals and they round them up and they violate their due process and kick them out the way that we wouldn't have done in the past. Okay, a lot of people wind up supporting that. The ACLU will be mad, but a lot of people will support it. Once they get to people who are not criminals, which is what most of the 10 million are, they're not criminals. How is the American public going to react to this? When they see pictures of a grandmother being pulled away, parents being separated from their kids, people who in the neighborhood, people saying they were a great neighbor, they worked hard, they, whatever. How are they going to respond to that? How are they going to respond to these budget cuts? We have midterm elections coming up. Are they going to see through some of this stuff? Or are they going to continue to be riled up by Trump's, talking about transgender BS and, talking about the Democrats wanting to destroy America and the great replacement theory and all this other crap that he and the Republican Party have been pushing for years and in the last election. To me, Biden said it years ago, we're in a fight for the soul of the country, but we're also in the fight for our view of reality. What do people care about? What do they believe? What reality is important to you? And when they start, proposing, which they've done, cutting all these things that you just listed, and maybe even getting into cuts for Social Security and Medicare for our elderly citizens, or Medicaid for our low income and middle income. Medicaid, a lot of people in the middle income category need Medicaid now with the cost of, and when they go after Obamacare and millions of people no longer can get health insurance because there's a concept of a plan out there that hasn't happened. How are people going to respond to this? Are they going to fall for the demagoguery? Are they going to get caught up in culture wars again? Or are they going to see that Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and J.D. Vance and the Republicans in Congress are screwing them and weakening the structure of the country? To me, that's the question for the next 2 years.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for making us all just smarter today and giving us your Mother Jones perspective. I truly appreciate it. And I will definitely need to have you back because there's going to be so much more to talk about. The chaos will continue, my prediction.
Yeah, and let me just ask people if they like what I say, like my stuff, sign up for my newsletter. It's called Our Land. You can go to davidkorn.com, and it should take you to a page to sign up for that. We're trying to build it up.
I subscribe to it, and so should everyone. David, thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. See you soon.
You got it, pal.